Well, my boy Teddy loves, well, he'll eat most any food, actually. We're pretty proud of the kid. He likes his protein, makes daddy proud, but he loves dessert, especially Jello. That kid will go crazy for Jello. I've not seen somebody love Jello like Teddy loves Jello. And I think of dessert in our episodes like the political conversations we have. What's going on in campaigns? What's the latest drama? What tactics are working and not working? People love that stuff on these episodes. I'm going to admit, this is more of a meat and potatoes episode. I promise no vegetables. This isn't straight up policy like some of our veto session or, end of session episodes where it's just constant policy and some of you just lose it. But it is topical based on issues in the news, things in the news, and how they're relating to campaigns coming up in the political world. So it is very much meat and potatoes, but it isn't the super juicy stuff. So please stick with us because there's a lot in this episode you need to know. There's some key things you need to be aware of if you want to win elections in 2026. So bear with us. I promise it's going to pay off if you join us on this episode. Joining us and bringing their expertise, we've got two special guests. We've got Craig Wilcox, state senator for the 32nd district, served on the McHenry County board, and is an Air Force veteran. I know we're a week late on this, Craig, but thank you, sir, for your service.
I appreciate that. And coming to you from our retail store, the Thoughtfulness Shop. Behind me, you've got all kinds of Department 56. So if I have to excuse myself to deal with a customer, I hope you understand.
We never say small business owner in this introduction, but Lane, we probably should add it since Craig's got that background too. We also have Carolyn Schofield. She's the McHenry County representative and the vice chair for CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. She's also in McHenry County Health Board. She's a state policy legislative effort and expert. And we don't plan this on purpose, but apparently we're doubling down on McHenry County guests and experts this week. Carolyn, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Great to be back on. Yeah, great to be back on with Senator Wilcox. So yeah, I'd love to have McHenry County in the house. Thanks.
I promise you we're going to be on with somebody different, but as often happens, schedules change. We shift things up in the last few hours, so it isn't intentional to keep pairing you two, but we do like that you bring your perspective from McHenry County, so that's nice. Never in his life having set foot in McHenry County is Chris Jackowiak. And Michael, I don't know if you've been in McHenry County, have you?
Yeah, I have once.
All right. I mean, you fit in a little better, Michael, than Chris does.
Collin, I spent a great time during our petition season this cycle in McHenry County in such lovely communities as Cary, Illinois, Crystal Lake, Illinois, and such other communities, where I was told by 4 out of 4 Republican primary voters that they would never vote for a Republican in their life, that they will be voting Democrat from here on out, and it has completely tanked my opinion of the people of McHenry County. So they're getting close to DuPage County territory for those experiences. So it would be a lie to say I have never been to McHenry County. I've also been to Senator Wilcox's house. So, and I've been to Senator Wilcox's house. So you were wrong from the get-go here.
Well, I know that you've been there, Chris, but I'm surprised. I don't remember getting the petition pages from you from Cary and Crystal Lake.
Well, I didn't say who I was getting petitions for.
Yeah,
I was just out there.
There we go. Already backpedaling in minute 3 of this episode. I like it.
I will go recheck my opponent's signatories and circulate.
There you go. All right. Well, let's get into our topics. This one, again, it's I never really planned to talk about crime, but sometimes things happen that just make you, I don't know, throw up a little bit. And this week, we've got a few topics like that. I'm not starting in the CTA blue line, though I promise I'll get there. First, we've got to talk about Kylie Toberman. 14-year-old girl was found dead behind her home. Last Friday, it was announced that she had vanished. People were looking for her, and a few hours later, they found her in an RV behind her home. She was sexually assaulted and then strangled by a relative with a violent criminal past. I'm going to use his name, Arnold Rivera, because he deserves to be called out for it. Just sickening. If you read the story, and I encourage you to do so, to look this up, just read the story, just see what's going on. And here's the key. This individual, it's not the first time he's committed a crime, not the first time he's committed crimes that were pretty awful. In 2000, he had charges dismissed against him for criminal sexual abuse involving a child between the ages of 9 and 16 and burglary, all in exchange for a guilty plea to felony aggravated battery, which got him probation. 30 months probation. He also pleaded guilty at another date in 2008 to possession of a stolen vehicle. And what did he get? You guessed it, 2 years probation. And now, hopefully, he's going to never, ever see the light of day again after this heinous of a crime. But it's not our only story this week. Let's go, I mentioned it, to the blue line. The victim's name has not been released, so I will not speak about it or use her name, but a 26-year-old young woman was attacked by Lawrence Reed, who, I'm reading here, took out an iced tea bottle, poured clear liquid onto her head, and then set her on fire. And then he watched as she was engulfed in flames, rolling around on the ground, trying to snuff out the blaze. This is an individual who has been tried and convicted multiple times for different things. In July 2021, he was convicted of aggravated arson, and he got, you guessed it, probation. Let's see here. 2 years before that, he was arrested and charged with criminal damage to government property. And I bet you could guess what he got. He got probation. According to Twitter, I don't know that this is true, but according to Twitter, this was his 49th arrest. I'd like to fact check that, but certainly based on what I've seen, there's a number of other things here. Again, all of which ended in probation for this individual. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was a significantly high number of times this individual's been arrested. You know what? We've got McHenry County people here. Let's stick in McHenry County. Let's talk about Effin Nolte and Caitlin Hayden, who it was announced on November 14th, so less than a week ago, that they were arrested by the Huntley Police Department for sexual conduct with an animal and filming it. But because the Safety Act does not allow for them to be detained, because that's not a detainable offense, they're back on the streets. So hide your pets. Hide your loved ones in McHenry County, apparently. Sorry to pile on you guys in McHenry County. And I don't have to tell the senator that we just saw a horrific incident with one of Don Harmon's staffers being held up with a knife and a really ridiculous and scary situation. And thank God everyone's okay. But we're seeing even the Senate president's staff is being robbed at knife point. We haven't even talked about immigration. I mean, Broadview facility, you saw multiple arrests and incidents there. We've seen it all throughout the region. Crimes on people's minds, and rightfully so. Just some sickening things. And again, we're seeing that this pro-criminal agenda in this state, where people just are given not just a second chance or a third chance, and I think many of us could agree that we want offenders to have opportunities to have a productive life, but you are seeing people's lives ruined. 14-year-old girl killed. 26-year-old woman is in still serious condition. We don't know her fate yet. All because individuals are being given not just one chance, not just two chances, but way too many chances, and they've already proven that they're a threat to society. So I want to get your thoughts, and let's start with our guests. We always like to let them have the first word on our first topic. Just your thoughts on where we are in the state of Illinois when it comes to crime.
So, Collin, it's all too easy to kind of jump to the Safety Act, but you read some long criminal record history. This legitimately is a soft on crime philosophy from the Democrat Party. And certainly in Cook County, where this belief or lack of belief that individuals who commit crimes are just going to immediately turn over a leaf and become outstanding citizens because the court went easy or light on them. Right? Parts of the Safety Act we probably could have agreed with. People remaining in jail for lack of bail for minor misdemeanors, lose their job, lose an opportunity to have income for their family, possibly acceptable. But the lack of judgment for judges we're seeing is undeniably hurting the community, whether it's stuffing a body and pouring bleach on it in a garbage can that's a non-detainable offense to what happened in Huntley. The state at a policy level has said Illinois doesn't care about the potential for future victims. In fact, we don't care about past victims, with the parole review board not notifying families. And this has got to change. Residents need to understand, and right, maybe it's one in X number of people become a victim of crime for someone that shouldn't be on the streets, but they know people, and we are getting sick of it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well, Craig, because you mentioned the Prisoner Review Board, this snuck under the radar. Thankfully, I found out about this week, but apparently second to last day of veto session, Pritzker's appointment to the PRB was forced through. Carmen Terrones, who's already faced A lot of questions for granting release to individuals who've been convicted of serious crimes. A lot of backlash already. Yet Democrats forced them through a second to last day of veto. So if you think that any of these stories is causing any amount of reconsideration by far left Democrats in the state for their policies, you are thinking wrong. There's no pressure here for them to change their ways.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like our discussions and our concerns on the parole review board were having an impact, and it was shocking. This is, one of the worst appointees, and for the majority party and the governor to push this one through, maybe there's a tie that we didn't see, haven't caught, personal favor. I don't know, but the progress that we were making in getting the parole review board refined and fixed seem to have taken a significant step back.
Carolyn, you've been trying to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in now because I agree with everything that Craig said as far as on like the policy side of it. But I have to just go back. As a mom, these are all just incredibly heartbreaking and sickening, and the fact that that the leaders of this state, of the city of Chicago, I think that it was Brandon Johnson came out and said it was an isolated incident, yet, failed to mention the 4 people that were murdered on that same line just last year. It's not, they're not offering any solutions. There's no policy changes, but it's just no solutions are coming forward. And the other, elephant in the room there is the mental health issues. The individual, had a history of mental health. There is not one mental health policy decision that's ever talked about. There are no efforts being made on there. There was an article about how, the governor's solution to mental health is to just keep people in jails. We have nothing in the state of Illinois to really address that mental health concern. And it's going to keep happening until those solutions are offered up and actually implemented.
Yeah, this Lawrence Reed individual for this crime in the CTA Blue Line, there's obviously mental health challenges here, but we've covered it, I think, twice in the last 3 or 4 weeks on this podcast, that in the state of Illinois, there is not mental health support. People are waiting months to be placed in mental health facilities, not for support, but just to make them ready for trial, let alone how long they have to wait for opportunities to actually get the support that they need. And so they kept giving this individual probation because I'm sure not to give the judges an out here, but I don't know that they had another option. The solution here isn't an easy one, but the thing is, you got elected to be governor, you got elected to be mayor, whatever it is. The solutions aren't always going to be easy, but we look to our leaders to actually lead, and that's not happening.
I'll give a shout out to McHenry County, though, that we do have a new, I think we talked about last time we were on the show that, we're the second in the state to have in the sheriff. He just started a new program actually within the jail there for mental health services and has 24/7. We're housing individuals unfit to stand trial and offering those services. So other communities need to step up, other, counties, and the state needs to step up because we're doing it here in McHenry County, but we can't do it alone.
Carolyn, I'm glad you brought that up because we've been talking about this more and more, that the Republican position in this state tends to be more balanced. They're always called extremists, and yeah, fine, we've got some knuckleheads, but the reality is, whether it's on energy or in this case on crime, we are actually not the extreme party. It's Democrats when it comes to crime to say that the solution is only empty the jails and have no penalties for criminals. Republicans aren't having we don't have the other extreme position, which is just lock them all up. We don't have that position. Some of the best systems for rehabilitation are Republican-led counties. You saw this, give them credit, Jim Mendrick in DuPage County. We saw this under Mark Curran in Lake County. We're seeing this in McHenry County. You are seeing Republican-led efforts to, yes, hold criminals accountable, but also make sure they have rehabilitation opportunities, that they have support, make sure there are job opportunities so that young people don't even turn to a life of crime in the first place. Republicans are the ones with a balanced, common sense approach on this issue, but it's yet another issue where in this state, Democrats are just extreme to one side.
Well, I think part of the problem is capacity because, Reagan and Governor Quinn closed the mental institutions in a lot of the state and a lot of this country. So there's not a lot of places where you can put those mentally impacted individuals in this state anymore. Now, like you mentioned, Sheriff Mendrick and former Sheriff Curran and even Sheriff Dart here in Cook County have taken steps in order to decrease the mentally ill population of a lot of the jails. But the reality of the situation is we no longer have a robust mental asylum, system within this country in order to put these people who desperately need help. And we just don't have that anymore. So a lot of them are either being relocated into jails, or they're just being left out on the street where they're either going to be homeless or they're going to fall into lives of crime, like this Reed situation that you've mentioned right here, Collin. In addition to the capacity issue, there's also obviously a policy issue and a political issue here. I thought it was interesting. I was reading a lot on Twitter this week in the aftermath of the CTA Blue Line incident. And a lot of people, very liberal-minded people, a lot of more affluent people were discussing, well, wow, this guy had been arrested. Well, how many times did you say, Collin? 43 or something along those lines?
49 is what they're saying.
Twitter said 49, but I have not been able to verify that.
It was a fairly large number. Let's say it's 49. No, this guy's been arrested 49 times. He's not in jail. He's not in jail. He's not in jail. And you always have to beg the question of, well, what are the policies you've been voting for? What are the things that you've been advocating for from a criminal justice perspective over the past 4 years? Those are the questions that a lot of people need to ask themselves, because I don't think people always like to talk about criminal justice and crime in terms of buzzwords. Okay, they want justice for mentally impaired individuals. They don't want these people to go and they don't want these people to be thrown in jail for the rest of their lives. And I understand that, but there's a babying when it comes to criminals, and if you do the reductio ad absurdum, you actually end up coming to places like this where you have people who are arrested, let's say 49 times, who are out on the streets lighting people on fire on the CTA Blue Line, and there's nothing to be done about it because the policies that have been put in place. So I think it would be a lot more intelligent if we had a Republican and a Democratic Party who were able to come together on this issue and say, listen, we have a mental health crisis in this state, in this country. We need to actually do something about this. We need to allocate resources towards this, while also locking up those who need to be locked up in jail for long periods of time. And if we could get to that point, if we can get to the point where crime has consequences and mental health has treatment, then we would actually be able to see a reduction in the crime rate and a betterment for the betterment of life for the people in the state, and specifically in Cook County and Chicago and all those things. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like that's going to be happening.
Well, Chris, putting our money where our mouth is at our company at Core, we've supported social service agencies, we've supported nonprofits, and we've taken some heat from it from some hardline conservatives who I won't mention, but we're putting our money where our mouth is and trying to do our part to help in this space. Again, I see that more from Republicans having that balance. I wish more in our party would do it, but I guess all we can do is lead by example.
Well, and I think, this election cycle, the 2026 cycle, every sheriff in the state is up. And if you're somebody that's, you're an incumbent sheriff, you're running for sheriff for the first time, this is something that you need to be thinking about, need to be talking about, because unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's an appetite in Springfield to address these issues, but we can do a lot at the local level, like, Mendrick and some of these other Tatelman, some of these other sheriffs have done, and have an impact.
Yeah. All right, let me move us to our next issue. So, the White House, not always great with communications, but whatever, not our problem, I guess. But they tried to communicate that inflation was going down and did it so poorly that they gave the left and the media an opportunity to say, so no, they're lying to you. They said that the price for Thanksgiving dinner is down in some basket of goods that they had selected, but they chose fewer items and off-brand items to make it seem like inflation was down. And it was just a stupid ham-handed way, and it gave Democrats an opportunity to say, look, see, the inflation's not actually down. The reality is inflation is actually easing. If you look at a release by the American Farm Bureau Federation, where they track the price of Thanksgiving, the national average of the price for Thanksgiving, it's actually down 5% from where it was last year. And that's a positive thing. That's good news. The reality is overall inflation still has a ways to go, but you are seeing some easing. It's still going up, let's be clear. It's not going down, though this is one good sign that maybe in some areas it's starting to go down. We got a lot more work to do, but that's the good news. Here's the bad news. Cost of living is still a massive pain point for Americans, and specifically for Illinoisans. CBS did a really balanced and a really great study. I encourage you to look it up on affordability, where they looked at what has been the driver of this and where is it hurting Americans the most. I'm going to quote a few key pieces here. They admit, and you don't see this often from the media, they admit that inflation is nowhere near where it was in June of 2022 and during many of the Biden years when it was 9.1 or approaching that number, but it's still higher than Americans would like to see. And they go through some key things. So they talk about food. In recent surveys, several of them they cite, almost half of Americans say it's harder to afford groceries today than it was a year ago. Only 19% said it's easier. And grocery prices continue, even though they've eased, they are still rising. Latest CPI report shows groceries rose 2.7% in September on an annual basis. That's a heck of a lot better than the 11.4 it was in the Biden administration, but still rising. We still have a problem here. Housing, almost 3/4 of Americans say that housing has grown more unaffordable in recent years. Based on recent polling, the data backs it up. A homeowner today needs to earn $121,400 a year to afford the typical home. Meanwhile, the average American earns $84,000 a year. Those numbers do not match. Childcare. The challenge of affording childcare is another huge problem and pain point for families. The average cost of childcare for one child in 2024 topped $13,000. That's up 30% from just 5 years ago. And families with a single child could end up paying 9 to 16% of their median income just on full-time daycare, according to the Department of Labor. Healthcare. Americans are getting rocked by healthcare costs. We've talked about it a lot, so I don't have to cover it too much here, but just some quick points. Americans, this is electricity, so I'll move on to electricity. But healthcare is killing Americans, whether it's increases in insurance, which we're seeing increases anywhere from 8 to 15+% just in insurance, to medical costs, which have exploded. Last one they covered here was electricity and utility costs. Americans now pay an average of $265 a month in utility costs, up 12% from last year. I think there's a lot of Illinoisans would actually prefer $265 because they're paying a lot more than that. That, by the way, is according to a progressive think tank, so I don't think we're just making this up here. And again, they talk about how it's gotten better this year, but it is still going up, and we've got to be aware that it's still going up. I'll end here so that our panel can finally get a word in. But this is a problem for Republicans, and here's where the rubber meets the road. The economy was Trump's strongest issue during his first term, but this is from the Wall Street Journal. Fully 75% view the current state of the economy negatively, even amongst Republicans. Nearly half of Americans, 45%, say Trump's economic policies have hurt them. Only 15% said that they've helped them. His approval on the economy is the second lowest it's ever been since October of 2017, when it was the lowest. He's now only at a 40 to 41% approval rating on the economy. Meanwhile, he's doing great on things like border security and crime. And okay, that's awesome. But the economy, what we're talking about here, cost of living, you're looking at these polls and it's saying that we've got a problem here. Last thing here, a Fox News poll, again, conservative outlet. We're not talking about some liberal outlet. Voters say the White House is doing more harm than good on the economy. 76% in this Fox News poll view the economy negatively, the worst that they've seen in years. And voters are blaming the president. About twice as many blame the president over Biden. Listen, I understand how we got here. I get the reality. I'm not telling you this is Republicans' fault. I'm telling you this is how voters feel right now. And as we have told you over and over and over and over, voters vote based on how they feel. And right now they feel like life is unaffordable. They feel like Republicans haven't come through for them. And that's going to hurt in a year at the ballot box if we don't turn that around. So with that, I open it up. Your thoughts on cost of living, the economy, they are huge issues right now.
Well, I think
that's what I paid for gas.
Okay.
That's $5.69, which means the effective tax rate is over 20% in Illinois. I mean, this is the challenge, right? We know Illinois policy has fed as much of this feeling as anything. CEJA and FEJA, removing production from the energy grid, driving prices up. Sales tax, gas tax. We're going to get hit on sales tax again before this next election. Do you think Illinois Democrats are going to pay the price for it? No. The administration in D.C. is going to pay the price of that feeling. And that is the challenge that you're talking about, Collin. And it gets so nuanced to try and tie, the feeling of lack of affordability to the policy positions. We've got to get better on explaining what we do differently and how we would go about that to make a change.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality, Craig. I mean, again, I was just talking about what the data said, what the voters are saying. I'm not saying this is a Republican fault, but that's what voters feel right now. And the reality is, in Illinois, especially when you talked about utilities and energy costs, that is absolutely driven by Democrat votes on CGen, FEGen, Surgen, and all the other us that they've pushed through. You talk about housing. I mean, you hear from realtors, hear from house builders how difficult it is to put a shovel in the ground in the state of Illinois. That lack of housing stock has driven up costs. The data is there. You look at healthcare. I mean, the constant mandates coming out of Springfield are part of what's driving up health insurance rates for everybody in this state. I mean, it is the decisions made by majority Democrats and Governor Pritzker that are driving a lot of these increases in costs in the state. But that's not how voters are going to vote, at least not as things stand today. So we have got some absolute work ahead of us if we don't want to get dragged down with the national mood on the economy and inflation.
Well, I think, if you remember back to that Biden-Harris campaign and, what ultimately became Harris-Walz, they took this approach that they were going to basically argue with the voters. Like, no, things are good, things are better. Don Lemon was out there saying, no, you're better off because of them, right? They were very argumentative. And we as Republicans, whether you're, an operative or a candidate or whatever, however you fit into this equation, you can't take that approach. The voters feel the way that the voters feel, and we have to, highlight the things that are moving in the right direction because, like you said, there's a lot of things that, gas prices, there's, Walmart put out their, Thanksgiving basket, said it was the lowest since 2019. So we're seeing some improvements. But you can't be out there arguing with people. You have to say, things are getting better. This is what we're doing to make it even better. Because we got to be the party of action, not the party of, defending the status quo.
Well, listen, in that same Fox News poll that they did, they said compared to a year ago, voters say, oh, hold on, let me get this right. Here we go. Voters think Republicans have a better plan for border security, immigration, and crime, while Democrats are seen as better on affordability, wages, healthcare, and climate. So if you take climate out of that, affordability, wages, healthcare, that's like three of the top five issues right now amongst voters. On Republicans, border security, immigration, and crime, on every poll I've seen, sometimes one of those might break into the top five, but usually they're in that fifth, sixth, seventh category of most important issues. People care about them, but not like the pocketbook issues. If we're winning on the issues that aren't the top issues with voters, that ain't going to work on election day. And as you say, I think you put that right, Michael. If we're just going to fight with the voters and say, no, things are great, that's like what Democrats are doing on crime. Look, the data says everything's great, but people don't feel safer, so they don't agree. When it comes to the economy, when it comes to inflation, you can say all you want that things are better, but go out there, take a camera, go out there on mainstream and ask people and tell me if you find anybody who agrees with you.
In relation to Senator Wilcox's point, I think Illinois Republicans are a little bit more uniquely positioned to attack this issue because they are arguing from a position of weakness from the opposition. They're arguing from the opposition. So one can make the argument that Illinois Democrats are raising costs. One of the reasons why you feel the way you do is because you live in the state of Illinois and the Democrats have been screwing you year after year after year so they can pay for whatever they choose down in Springfield and not actually run an effective state. And that's a pretty good argument if you're an Illinois Republican. From
Yeah.
national, go ahead, Colin.
No, I want to piggyback off your point because I agree with you, but I want to let you finish first. Go ahead.
From a national Republican perspective, you're kind of caught within a rock and a hard place, especially if you're a candidate running for Congress or something like that, because you want to. Here's the thing: you want to say that your options are. You can say that like, oh, the economy is actually doing great right now. Look at how much Nvidia stock is going up, because that's what all these Wall Street talking heads want to talk about. It's like, oh, look at how good the AI market and the tech market's doing right now. So you can say things like that. And, if you're John Q. Public and you don't particularly care about that stock, then you're kind of screwed. So you can take that angle and tell people things are going well, and it's not going to get you anywhere. Alternatively, you can take the approach that's worked for Republicans and say the emperor's not wearing clothes. The economy's actually in a pretty rough spot right now. We need to make some pretty drastic changes to the way our economy's run if we want to actually ever get to what normalcy looks like in this country again. The problem is you're arguing against an incumbent Republican president, and that's not going to get you any favors with Republican voters, and it's not going to get you any favors with national Republicans. So national and federal Republicans are kind of caught with between a rock and a hard place right now about whether or not they're going to be able to approach how they're going to approach this issue. What I would say is, if you're a Republican for any office in Illinois, be it federal or state, you can always rely on the fact that you are in a Democratic state. You can always blame the Democrats for the current state of Illinois. Everything. We can always blame Browner, of course, and the Democrats will always keep doing that, and I'll keep doing that as well. But at least if you're a Republican, I'm saying you do have an opportunity that a Republican in, say, Indiana is not going to have, or a Republican in, say, Florida is not going to have.
Yeah. Well, Chris, let me talk about that. You talk about how Illinois, we have an opportunity here. And you're actually, I'm going to say this publicly on the record. Chris is right. Republicans do have a tremendous opportunity in this state specifically because Democrats are in control. You have to denationalize the conversation and bring it to state, but you can't do that if you don't talk about it. And this is what drives me crazy, and frankly, many others crazy, is that for whatever reason, Republicans and conservatives in this state refuse to have this conversation. And I've been at my wit's end for a long time, so this is not a new rant for anybody who's ever watched one of these episodes, but it's a rant I'm going to have again, because Chris is right. If we actually had the conversation, if we actually talked about affordability and cost of living with voters, maybe then we could connect the dots for them and show them that their number one issue, their number one frustration is driven by Democrats in this state, but we don't engage on the issue. And part of the problem, probably going to get myself in trouble here, but let's talk about a recent thing put out by IPI. They did some polling. They've done this before. They just did it again, where they put out a poll. They did it a whole thing and put it out to their network saying, look, taxes are the number one issue in the state of Illinois. More than half of Illinois voters, 1/3 of Chicago voters say high taxes are their number one concern. High taxes impact are 52%, and they have a whole thing about it. And that sounds really compelling. It's like, okay, well then taxes are clearly the number one issue. That's big. And a lot of people trust IPI, which is why I'm so frustrated by this. If you scroll down and you actually look at the questions that were asked, and more importantly, the answer options that were provided, people were only allowed to choose between the following: high taxes, the economy, state government, immigration, crime, housing, education. There are two biases there. First of all, you said high taxes, not taxes. So there's already, any pollster will tell you, there's already a bias there pushing people towards that option. But notice there was no option in there for inflation, cost of living. There wasn't other issues too that people typically choose, like threats to democracy. But okay, I get it. A lot of Republicans don't include that. Fine. But there isn't even the option to choose the cost of living or inflation. And so, of course, people are going to choose high taxes. It's called a forced choice or a push poll. This is a junk poll done by IPI. And frankly, their pollsters should know better. I'm not going to call them out because they're a competitor, but they should know better. And I really do trust and rely and love one of their pollsters who's on frequently. So I hope that maybe he raised a concern about this, because this is total BS. But there's a lot of people who rely on IPI, especially people who are, let's say, former employees who are now running for governor or state representative, who've then parroted this, and staffers who used to work there and work with them who are parroting this. It's all taxes, taxes, taxes. It's like, no, you are basing this on a junk poll that didn't even give people the option to choose cost of living or inflation. Everyone in this business nationally will tell you the number one issue right now is cost of living. Literally everyone, not just us, not just Collin Corbett, not just CORE, nationwide. 100 out of 100 pollsters, strategists, political experts will tell you it is cost of living right now. That is number one, number two, number three. It's not even just number one. It is everything right now. But I don't know why, whether it's IPI or Illinois Republicans, they refuse to talk about cost of living. Every once in a while, they'll slip in the word. Maybe they'll say affordability once, or, bury a reference to cost of living somewhere in there. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it, because the data is the data. It's not about who was right or who was wrong. I'm not trying to think, oh, I'm saying this, so you got to listen. It's here. The data is right here. And I've proven that I'll just follow the data. I've had several clients recently where I said, you should talk about X, and this is our strategy. We did some polling, and I was right about some of it, and I was wrong about some of it. And the stuff I was wrong about, I said, I'm wrong about this. We need to change it because the data says differently. It's not about, ooh, who's right or who's wrong. It's do the smart thing and go win a damn election. I don't understand why we refuse to do that in Illinois. I'll get off my soapbox and let somebody else speak finally.
Yeah, and Collin, that's going to be the thing, right? Taxes are number one topic, certainly in Chicago and Cook County for the next week or two.
They're the number one feature of the cost of living issue. I don't deny that.
However, right, if you listen to what the constituents are saying, yeah, they're belly aching about that property tax bill, but their response is Going to have to change how I'm shopping. Going to have to change where we go. Guess we won't be taking the vacation. Every impact to them is that day-to-day cost of living between now and when they have to make that payment. So even if you make the claim and the data shows it that it is a result of the taxes, that's not how it plays out day to day to the individual. It's what money is in the wallet. It's not what the stock market is doing. No one lives off their 401k if you're still working. You may see it go up and it may feel kind of good, but it is not dollars in your pocket. If wages aren't increasing, if the dollars are going out of your wallet quicker, if the credit card bills are a little bit higher every month and there's not much left at the end every month, or you're getting behind every month, it absolutely is that affordability cost of living.
Listen, our next topic is taxes. I don't deny that in the state like Illinois, taxes is the number one place you start when it comes to the problem of affordability in the state. So we're going to spend however much time next talking taxes. So I get it, but you've got to understand it's not the thing. It's the thing that gets you to the thing. It's taxes, it's healthcare, it's utility rates, it's energy costs, it's housing affordability, it's drug prices. It all comes together for people just can't afford to live right now. That's the end result. And we get stuck talking policy because we're a bunch of freaking policy nerds and we don't ever actually talk about the real world impact of how those policies impact regular people. And it's the impact that is the last thing they think about before they check a box at the polling booth.
But Colin, didn't you kind of just tie the two together when you were talking about the federal administration and how, they get blamed for the past decisions that have been made in I think people in Illinois, we're so different here. We operate so differently that, our federal and our state levels are completely polar opposite of one another. So sometimes I think people that are running more at the state level or looking at the state level are afraid to put it out there that, that cost of living or affordability, because then they could, have that trickle down from the federal administration who's saying the opposite message. So
God forbid a Republican out there say that the White House is not doing everything perfect. God forbid we ever do that.
I mean, we just need to go to the grocery store and, the reality's there. So why people aren't mentioning it. And it doesn't matter whose fault it is. We need to do something about it.
Yeah, which is what you could say if you're a federal candidate. By the way, we've got a federal candidate as a client. Look at how he's handled it. There is a way to do it. You're not just whacking congressional Republicans in the White House. There is a way to do this, but you can't just put your head in the sand because, as Carolyn just said, the issue is there. Whether you talk about it or not, your voters are. All right, let's go to taxes. I promised. Well, here, just real quick. As an illustration, I've already gotten myself in trouble, so why not do it one more time? I won't use names, so I don't get myself in too much trouble, but I've been holding on to this article for a little while here because just before veto session, a media outlet asked a Democrat and a Republican to sum up what they're going to do down in veto session. And the Democrat that they asked said, one of the most important things that I'm looking at is I'm looking at the cost of living and how that's affecting our working families here in my district. They asked the Republican. The Republican said, you're going to probably see the House Republicans exposing and opposing legislation. Finally, eventually, after being prodded, they finally got into issues that matter to voters and said, a really bad bill that actually scares me more than any increase in tax because at the end of Illinois, with the policy of bring your own energy. I do this for a living, and I couldn't tell you what the hell that means or what they were trying to say. This is the problem. Democrats, that quote by the Democrat was chef kiss perfect. Quote by the Republican.
Sounds like you wrote it, Colin.
Almost like I did, which I didn't, but almost like I did. And then the quote by the Republican, I have no idea what they were saying. So not using names, I'm sure you could Google it. I'm sure who said it is going to be unhappy. But guess what? The reality is we need to get better at this. Democrats are great at talking about this issue. And by the way, it's all talk because it's a lie, because they're horrible at it. And yet they're still better than us. It's something that they are lying through their teeth about. Could we please, I beg of you, Republicans, start talking about the cost of living and stop being, I'll say it, stop being dumbasses. Let's go win some elections. All right, let's move on before I get in more trouble. I mentioned we would talk taxes because we gotta, because taxes are a huge problem in Illinois, and Democrats have just said they want even more. There was a forum on Tuesday, I think Tuesday, maybe Monday, whatever, earlier this week, where the front-runner comptroller candidates for the Democratic side all participated in that forum, and every single one of them said they wanted to see a graduated income tax in Illinois and see an amendment to the Constitution. Every single one of them said they wanted to raise taxes, and two of them talked about other taxes they wanted to raise. They didn't want to stop there. There were other taxes that they wanted. And by the way, all of them said the $55.1 billion budget that was passed, the record high budget in Illinois, they said that doesn't spend enough. All of them did. Those are your Democratic candidates for comptroller. Let's be clear here. The one job in Illinois that's supposed to be more fiscally responsible, the one job, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that's supposed to be watching your tax dollars, watching the spending, and at least be a little bit of a check and balance on the legislature and the governor, and the Democratic candidates for that office want to see your taxes go up and want to see spending go up. Number one, that should tell you how important the comptroller's race is in Illinois. And number two, that should tell you just how far Democrats are in terms of wanting more of your tax dollars. Just this last week, you saw the launch of Pat Quinn's new statewide campaign where he's pushing the millionaire's tax to add a 3% surcharge on incomes for millionaires. And Gilbert Villegas in Chicago put his own measure on the Chicago ballot to push that as well in Chicago. You're seeing pushes in other areas to push that progressive tax back on the ballot soon. We've been warning y'all. People said we were crazy. We've been warning you that it's coming, and here we go. They're talking about it more and more. You have in the city of Chicago, Johnson wants his head tax. He wants all sorts of other taxes. Paris Schultz put out a list of 21 different tax and fee hikes that were in Mayor Johnson's budget. And oh, by the way, Austin Berg had this on Twitter when at a press conference after Johnson's budget was voted down. Here's his quote: "There's no correlation between taxation and the success, if you will, of corporations." That's literally how tone deaf and oblivious these Democrats are. And the bill is coming due. This is where I'll stop and let everybody jump in. Maria Pappas, Cook County Treasurer, who's now running for like 16 offices at a time, but Maria Pappas is out with a report that showed a dramatic drop in the value of loop commercial real estate, which has shifted, her words, not mine, tremendous amounts of taxes to homeowners. $129 million by her estimate that's been shifted to homeowners. That's a 17% jump in the median city residential bill. Their residential bills is going up, obviously, all throughout Cook County. The quote I love is, "The bill for Chicago's empty loop just came due." Republicans have been talking about this. Craig, I know, has been talking about this, that when you continue to drive your job creators out of this state, when there are fewer and fewer people who are paying taxes in this state, it puts that burden on all the rest of us. And we are seeing that bill come due with these property tax bills. So taxes are a problem, and yet Democrats, they just want to keep bringing them up higher. What do you guys think about that?
Well, and there was the clip from a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, where a Chicago alderman confronted Pritzker, and Pritzker said, "Yeah, we need the progressive income tax," and he said he was going to continue fighting for that. So from the top levels of the Democratic Party all the way down, you have people advocating for tax increases, and they put this on the ballot once, and how did it turn out for them? Not good.
After $60 billion in spending from Pritzker?
Yeah.
Plus all the unions and everybody else spending money on it, and it still wouldn't pass in a state like Illinois. But hey, they want to try it again.
Be our guest, right? We'll beat them again.
But while I share your feelings, Michael, I think the point here is you look at Democrats. We just talked about the cost of living problem in this state. And in Illinois specifically, this is a Democrat problem, and they still don't have enough of your money. That's only going to raise the cost for working families. I mean, Craig just watched this happen down in Springfield. Carolyn just watched this happen down in Springfield, where they raised tolls and sales taxes throughout this region, incredibly regressive taxes that are going to hurt working families the most. You just saw in Chicago last week, the tone-deaf quote when they wanted to add a delivery tax in Chicago, and they just said, well, just order things online, and then you won't have to pay it. It's like, it's seniors who are ordering things online. It's single mothers who are ordering things online. Those are the people you claim to want to serve and to help, yet you are constantly raising taxes and fees on those individuals. Those are regressive taxes. That's what Democrats are doing, and we got to do a way better job calling them out on it.
I would have to guess that it's going to be an either or thing in terms of whether or not they're going to try the progressive tax again, or they're going to make a run with Pat Quinn's, millionaire surcharge amendment. If I were them, I'd make a run at the millionaire surcharge amendment. They've already done a dry run of it in a non-binding way on the 2024 was it a 2024 ballot or 2022 ballot, Colin?
It was 24, but don't
Yeah,
quote me.
yes, right. 2024 ballot. They've already done a dry run in it, and if you look at the underlying data, it didn't do that well in areas where you like in wealthier neighborhoods. It did not do as well, obviously. So that's a sign that it might not do well. It might do worse in those communities in an actual full run at that election. But even still, it was overperforming where the fair tax amendment was doing in 2020 or 2020. So I think that if the Democrats are smart here, they'll give Pat Quinn's 3% surcharge a go before they do the progressive tax again. At the same time, the Democrats right now are confident to such a degree, especially if this happens to be Pritzker versus Bailey again, and the winds of the national winds keep moving in a certain direction, they may go all in and try the progressive tax again, and it will not be the same campaign that they ran in 2020. This is what I've been trying to tell everybody for years.
You said it before, Chris. We heard you before.
Yeah, but exactly. So it's not going to be a guarantee that the Republicans are going to be able to fight back a fair tax amendment again. So all of this is to say is that the Democrats clearly seem like they're going down a path where they want to instill another tax on high income earners in the state, and it's something to look out for and prepare for if you're a Republican or a millionaire or someone making an exorbitant amount of money over the course of the next several months.
Yeah.
I'll say, Colin, one thing that they're way better at, though, is you just named off how many different little cutesy names that they've had for their different bills that they've run or referendums. I mean, we're not good at coming up with a cute name to defend it or be on the other side of it, and they're going to keep running it. And my fear is you talk to the younger voters, they're with them. I mean, you talk to younger kids and they've heard these names like, oh, fair tax. Like, I want a fair tax, like they don't even know what it means, but yet they'll vote for it because that's all they've heard. So, my fear is the more cycles it goes, then the closer they'll get to actually getting it passed because of those younger voters that are going to come in. And we need a way to defend it. I mean, if we lose, you touched on with property taxes, if we lose those millionaires from the state of Illinois, where's all that money going to go? It's going to come over all the other residents that are left behind. So, we need a messaging to get that point across that it's actually going to cost us in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Kiker on that. I don't know how many more times we've got to defend millionaires while they continue donating to Democrats. I think if this gets on the ballot, it's time for them to put up or shut up. You know what? If you want to keep donating to Democrats and electing Democrats, then pay more taxes. Fine. But if you want us to actually stand with you, then maybe stop electing the people that keep trying to screw you. But that's a different conversation. But Carolyn, to your point about naming things, even during that progressive tax fight, I can tell you that the group that had all of the millions of dollars from Ken Griffin, plus some of the IPI aligned groups, we did some significant research to identify a number of messaging stuff that nobody on their side was interested in hearing. But specifically, we did something groundbreaking and we figured out what's the best way to word this. What do you call it to reduce support the most? We called it 4 different things in some testing and focus groups and research and polling. And we found the one version that performed the worst. And so we said, hey, let's all agree to call it this, because when you call it this, regardless of the policies and everything else, it performs the worst. And they're like, nah. And they kept calling it one of the other ones where it actually performed better. Like, that's how bad we are on messaging. It's like we had data that said, here's a great thing to call this that would work, and that they still weren't even interested. So, Carolyn, to your point, I hope maybe this time around we might get a little smarter and think, hey, let's actually use some messaging and some data, because we're not going to have Ken Griffin's money. We're not going to have all the same opportunities we had last time to beat this. And Chris is right. The left will run a better campaign because they ran a horrible campaign last time around. If they put this on the ballot, it's probably going to win because we are that inept. So we're going to have to get our acts together and do it fast.
I just want to add one other point in terms of taxes. It's amazing to see the discrepancy of how budgeting is discussed in the city of Chicago and how it's done in the rest of the state. When it's done in Springfield for the state budget, it's everything must go. We need to raise we're going to raise these taxes. We're going to get this done. We're going to add these fees. And all the Democrats just kind of go along with it. Yeah, they complained in 2024, but now they don't complain much anymore for whatever reason. If you do, you're Fred Crespo and you get thrown out of the caucus. But in Chicago, conservative and moderate Democrats are pretty open about, like, oh yeah, we're screwed, guys. We got to start doing some stuff here about this. So it would be amazing. And this is the future of Illinois I want to see, because I'm a realistic person, is that I want to see Democrats who are willing to speak up about these issues and say, no, the current fiscal trajectory of this state and this city and this county is such that we are going down a path of no return. We may already be there, and it's going to take some drastic measures in order to dig ourselves out of this. I think within the backs of their minds, they recognize this. That's why there's this push for a fair tax, for a surcharge on millionaires. I think within the back of their minds, they know that the state does not have the revenue projections needed to actually make a solvent for the long-term future. I think they know that. But the problem is they're immediately going towards the increase in taxation, even if it's on the rich, and, screw them, that's my opinion, but that's my opinion, okay? Even if it's that, the problem is that there's other things that we can do in this state and to actually make it so that, we're in a better fiscal state. Just to conclude here, Alderman Matt O'Shea, he was talking today, and he said, if you can't tell me in 30 city departments that there's something that you can cut, that there's reductions you can make, if all 30 departments can't find those, then we don't know what we're doing here. And I think that's the mentality that Democrats, Republicans, of course, we're talking about people in power here for a second, that Democrats need to find if they actually want to make some actual change in the state, or there's not going to be a state of Illinois in the next 10 years.
So, Chris, the odd aspect there, the Democrats, I don't believe, have ever considered the fact that you can bring in more revenue by reducing taxes, right? And we have the one very good example. They wanted to bring in 5 times as much money on trailer registration fees, and they raised trailer registration fees 5-fold. It took less than a year for the individuals and citizens of Illinois to decide, not registering my trailer, I'm leaving it up in Wisconsin or Michigan. You know what? I'm just going to risk going around without a registration because it's only a $20 fine instead of the $100 registration fee. In less than a year, we saw a significant drop in the amount of revenue being brought in as opposed to the raise they were. And in that year, we were able to reverse that. They just don't think that you can encourage business growth enough by reducing taxes that you ultimately see bigger revenue on the end. So every one of their ploys, usually it's hidden, it's tax the rich, knowing that once they get that constitutional change, the rates are just a legislative vote. It will never remain just tax the rich. So they look to change the wholesale structure that then allows that slippery slope to the end, which is what they really want, is revenue growth that they can choose where it comes from and not have to deal with the flat tax, sales tax that hits everybody.
Yeah. And Craig, we just saw that with transit. I'm a broken record on this, but I'm still flabbergasted that no one seems to care that Democrats just pushed through a bunch of regressive taxes on working families to solve the transit crisis, which we all agree we needed to address the fiscal cliff that transit agencies were facing, especially Metro and Pace. But the reality is they put this on the back of working families and we're like, okay, we're cool with that. Like if you believe that Democratic Party isn't going to take the power of progressive taxation to go from millionaires to you, then you are living under a rock in this state.
Right, because who'd they protect? The Chicago residents. No fare increases, no additional sales tax there, right? It's on the perceived group.
They get the sales tax, but they're not paying the tolls, and they're barely paying any of that burden. But you're right.
9% of the tolls come out of Chicago residents. Yeah.
A tiny bit of that is hitting Chicago, so you're 100% right. All right, let me take it to the next topic. Sure, this is going to fire up all of us a little bit, but to no surprise, we were momentarily surprised thinking that Don Harmon would actually be held responsible for breaking election law, but that didn't ultimately happen. The State Board of Elections remained split 50-50, so no action was taken, no penalty has been levied. Don Harmon is going to skate and not pay anything for breaking election law. As Chris will say, and I'll say it before he does, you can do anything. Doesn't matter in Illinois especially. You can get away with anything in this state. But don't worry, the spokesperson for Harmon said in his official capacity as Harmon's as the Senate president spokesperson that Harmon is committed to advancing campaign finance reform in 2026. You know, the same Don Harmon who has refused to advance campaign finance reform and ethics reform, the same Don Harmon who has backed multiple members in his caucus who have done some pretty egregious things, and yet Harmon's the only guy still standing with him. That Don Harmon, according to his spokesperson, is going to advance campaign finance reform. So it's okay, all you other people. Don't worry. We'll do something about this, we promise. Meanwhile, Chuy in D.C. has gotten his slap on the wrist. House passed a resolution condemning his move to pass his seat on. Of course, he cried, and all of his allies cried that, oh, you're attacking his family, and this was all a family move by him, even though he was the first signature on his chief of staff's petitions. And he had already done this once before for county board, but no, this wasn't a political maneuver at all. You know, anybody could have run in the Democratic primary, even though in the past Chuy's organization would threaten anybody who dared run against him or any of their candidates. But no, anybody could have run in that primary. This was open and honest. What are you talking about? We love democracy. Last thing I'll say, this is ticky-tack, but this is still in the list for me. Legislative caucus schedules have been released for 2026, and they basically decoupled the House and the Senate. And so if you want to go down there and lobby members of the House or members of the Senate, at this point, it's much, much harder to do because they're not in session at the same time. And so they've made it even harder for citizens to interact with and participate in their own government. It's just par for the course in the state of Illinois. You want to see ethics reform, it's not going to happen under Democratic leadership. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. Anybody have thoughts?
I didn't catch that last one that you mentioned, Collin, as far as how they decoupled the House and the Senate. And yet, it just goes to show you how far we've become and how far apart we've become, because isn't the whole concept that they're all there at the same time and they can go and talk to each other? I mean, I've been down there, 15 years ago when you could go, and there were actually Republicans would walk into Democrats' offices, and whether, a House or senator would go in and they would actually work together and try to find compromise and carry each other's bills. And now not only lobbyists, but it doesn't even allow them to work together anymore.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on all of this. So, the first two, the third one, I think Carolyn said it accurately. So Don Harmon, I gotta word myself carefully. I've been thinking about how I'm going to word this all day, and I haven't been able to get it. But somebody ought to try this again. Somebody, or what would happen if somebody tried this again? What would happen if Senator Craig Wilcox, whoever that could be, were to do exactly what Senator Don Harmon did, and then go in front of the State Board of Elections and go in front of the hearings? What would happen then? Would there also be no ramifications for those actions? Would it be a 4-4 split again? There's 4 Republicans on the board. There's 4 Democrats on the board. Would they split and say, oh, no, you don't got to do anything? Or would those Republicans have a soul and say, oh, no, you broke this is what Republicans do.
This is the problem. Republicans are ethical. They would actually vote for the fine.
Right. So that's the most amazing thing. So somebody ought, what if hypothetically someone were to try that? I'm very curious how that would go. On the second point, Collin,
just to be clear, Chris, I would be angry if the Republicans didn't do the right thing and levy the fine. Like, that is the difference. You've got good government advocates on the Republican side who are in that role to do the right thing. They would absolutely levy the fine on Craig Wilcox. And they should.
It's 8-0 at worst, maybe 7-1.
Yep.
I would be mad if the So this is why Collin and I are different. I would be mad if the Republicans voted to fine him.
Because you're pure political hack. I'm like, I occasionally can slip out of my hackishness.
But on the second point with Chuy Garcia, Collin, I think you're underplaying how Chuy's getting off here, because I think it's a little worse than you're making it out to be, because just following what a lot of progressive activists and or progressive base types are saying, not even progressive, just Democrat, talking heads are saying about this. It's actually been really rough on Chuy, and been really rough on House Democrats for their inability to condemn this. Because one thing you can say about national Democrats, you can't necessarily say about Chicago Democrats, but national Democrats to some degree, they don't like things like this. It's a little greasy for them. So a lot of them are thinking and saying that, no, we need to condemn this. And then the House Democratic Caucus is like, No, they're completely ignoring these wishes. They're completely ignoring the voices in their head telling them not to do this out of pure solidarity with Chuy. And I got to say, I don't think this could work. I think that there is a small angle here for Republicans to actually take advantage of this because it shows how lockstep the Democrats can be on certain issues. And I think there's an opening here because I think Chuy's getting worse than I think. I did not expect this. I didn't expect anything to happen to Chuy in the House.
Well, you only saw two Democrats vote for that. You saw Bill Foster and Eric Sorensen, which IL-17 is our best pickup. So, that's a missed opportunity for us in that case to be able to whack on Sorensen. But if you're a Republican and let's say one of the two serious Republicans in IL-6, you should be talking about it. I know we've been talking about it, opposing obviously Robin Kelly and Raja in the Senate race. We should be talking about it if you're running an aisle 14 and you're running against Underwood. Like, I know these races are a little bit less close to being right there, but not enough Republicans are talking about this.
Well, and I think you use it to prove the larger point, right? You talk about Harmon, you talk about Garcia, and some of the things that the Democrats have done as of late that has not been ethical. And you say, they're claiming to be the party that protects democracy, but they're violating campaign finance laws in egregious ways. They're, doing this switcheroo and file to run and then withdraw so your staffer can get the job. I think there was a state rep that did the same thing, right? So it's becoming a more common practice in this state. And it's sad that only two of the Democrat representatives from the state of Illinois are willing to condemn it.
Yep.
Now, wait a minute. At least they had her go get the signatures. So they had to do some work. It wasn't like they skipped a primary and then did a switcheroo in the middle of the summer.
Listen, if you do the switcheroo in the middle of the summer, it's actually more democratic process because you have to have the county chairs, or in this case, it would have been the ward committeeman and the township committeeman. They would have been the one making the change on the ballot. Those people are democratically elected every 4 years. So,
Chris, I was referring to that caucus that the Dems had for Harris to replace Biden.
Oh, I thought you were getting a rise out of me, Senator. My apologies.
Chris always thinks it's about him. He thought you were talking about Lipinski, but the reality is we're talking about switching Biden to Harris. But, everything's about Chris. Whatever. Let me take us to the next topic so I keep us moving along. We do have one political topic this week. We probably don't have a ton to cover here, but major developments in the Illinois governor's race. Darren Bailey has posted a letter he received from Donald Trump encouraging him to fight, fight, fight. Now, to be clear, the letter clearly wasn't written to say, hey, fight, fight, fight in the governor's race, and I'm supporting you in that, even though that's kind of how the campaign's spinning it. But you know what? That's how I'd spin it too. So no disrespect to them. That's exactly what I would do too. So I guess kudos to them for using it effectively. But the president has written a letter, or one of his staffers, more likely, but still, it's a letter on Trump White House letterhead that they're using pretty effectively in the campaign. So curious if anybody has thoughts on that. More importantly than anything, our opponent, the guy we need to beat no matter who you support in this primary, is J.B. Pritzker. He just dumped in another $25.5 million into his account. So regardless of who you end up supporting in the primary, and we encourage if our guests or panelists want to share their thoughts on who they're supporting, go for it. This is an open forum. I think we can all agree on March 18th. We're on the same team, and there's one person we have to defeat.
Well, I think it just it highlights, the state of affairs where we were patting Ted on the back for Dabrowski for raising, $1.2 million. Oh, attaboy, good job. And then Pritzker says, here's $25 million in my account and doesn't even think about it. And I'm sure there's probably a heck of a lot more where that came from.
He spent almost $200 million in his last couple of campaigns. So this is just a small drop in the bucket.
Yep.
See, Collin, the way you're wording this sounds like the best week for Darren Bailey's campaign so far this cycle. Because you're telling me $20+ million went into JB Pritzker's campaign account. That means Darren Bailey's going up on TV. Everyone, it's going to be a great win. You're going to start seeing Darren Bailey ads like you've never seen them before. Now they're going to be paid for by JB for governor, of course, but even still, this is the ticket. It doesn't matter how well Darren's doing in fundraising right now. It doesn't matter. Everything has been done for him this week. He's got a letter from the Orange Man that he can send out there to his donors to actually get money into his committee. And then now he's got Pritzker putting money into the Pritzker committee so he can start getting up on TV. Great week for the Darren Bailey team. Well done.
I mean, the reality is that Pritzker probably won't have to spend that money, which is just the sad state of affairs in the primary. But here's what I want to see. Okay, we've talked about it. I want to see something out of one of these candidates that proves they can win. The Bailey campaign has used this letter effectively on social media. They just got it. So, I want to see what happens the next week or two. But Chris, your point is valid that a well-run campaign uses this letter to raise a significant amount of money from low dollar, mid dollar, and high dollar donors. You get it out in text to low dollar donors. You're putting this in fundraising mailings to mid dollar donors, and you're using it to raise money from high dollar donors. I want to see this in A1s and campaign finance reports in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we won't see the low dollar stuff under 150, but anything above that we could, or under 1,000, anything above that we can see soon, and I want to see it. That's what we keep asking for. One of these candidates to prove they're a real threat to JB Pritzker, a real professionally run campaign. And if you get this letter and you don't go out there and raise a significant amount of money as a result of it, then that is a travesty. I want to see it. I'm begging. We're not supporting any of these candidates. We've said it before. Somebody step up, please, because Pritzker needs a serious challenge. All right, I said it'd be a quick political discussion. I guess it was quick. Any other thoughts, Carolyn? You unmuted.
Well, I just have two quick ones. I'm not so sure I'm with you guys on both of those topics. I mean, one, I think that people should start using that 25 million against Pritzker. I mean, why do we continue to allow these billionaires to run our state and tell them how they're such the man of the people? It's just like, why aren't people pointing that out more? And why are people not coming to that realization? As long as you have somebody who can drop $25 million like it's nothing, there's no way they can relate to you and actually make good decisions on your dollars that you work hard for. Yeah. And then the second one, I don't know, that Bailey letter, I'm not sold on that's a positive thing. I mean, that was taking a tragedy and now putting it for a campaign. I look at it a little bit differently.
Carolyn, you have a soul though. That's your problem.
Maybe.
I mean, because the reality is some of it I haven't loved, like the silhouette photo on Facebook with the kid and I'm going to say it. I'll be in trouble for this, but yeah, a little too much for my taste of using the tragedy for the campaign. However, politically, if I become Chris and I'm just a soulless Politico hack, okay, it's worked for the campaign. So if you're just talking politics, which is what the point of this podcast is, then you know what? You got it. They're using it well. If you actually are talking because I've talked to some people who felt the same way as you, Carolyn, and I feel it sometimes too, but it is good politics, so I can't really attack them for it, but I do get what you're saying.
Well, and I didn't notice it originally, and then I had, forwarded that letter to my cousin, and he's noticed that it was, mailed on October 23rd. That's the date. So, it's almost a month later, and they're posting that on social media like they're trying to get a little bit more mileage out of this,
Yeah, like I said, it's good politics.
Good politics.
For some, it may have an icky factor, and I could understand that. But it's good politics.
Collin, you always like to talk about how you have a soul, not recognizing the fact that you're a redhead. I thought gingers didn't have souls. Haven't we over this?
Yeah, well, we could get into a talk about your Catholicism, and we could have a whole discussion, but I think we lose all of our listeners at that point.
I was just making a rise out of your hair. You could have just said, at least I have hair, Chris, and it would have been a lot funnier.
One of these days, we're going to have that religious discussion, and we'll end up having 0 smoke-filled room viewers, but we'll enjoy it.
And maybe the Pope will turn in that week.
There we go. Yeah. We'll have 1 viewer. It'll be exciting. All right, our last topic here before we close down with our quick hits and OGs and clowns. This one's going to be chart heavy and visual heavy. So to our guests here and our panelists, forgive me, I will walk you through this, but Lane's going to bring up a number of things on screen. Democrats put out a deciding to win report that they had dozens and dozens of people contribute. Names you would recognize: David Axelrod, Sherry Bustos, James Carville, Dan Pfeiffer, David Plouffe, Nate Silver, and a bunch of others that I didn't know, but others might know. This was a big report that they did, and it found some interesting things that they, of course, did to focus on how to improve the Democratic Party. I want us to take this and learn from it. So look that up, the Deciding to Win report. I encourage you to read the whole thing. I'm going to quickly, in 90 seconds or less, I want to highlight the big things, and Lane will bring them up on screen really quickly. First, they show that the Democratic Party has moved significantly to the left since 2012. Lane's going to show you a chart where they show the shift in the share of Democratic members of Congress who co-sponsored pieces of progressive legislation and how significantly that has increased over the last 11 years. Next chart here is how much perceptions of the two parties have changed since 2012. You'll see here, as Lane's showing you, that perceptions of Democrats have changed significantly. Voters have noticed this leftward shift. The share of voters who see the Democratic Party as too liberal has increased significantly. Here's the kicker. If you look at this chart, the share of voters who have seen Republicans as too conservative actually decreased. Now, to be clear, look at the far right of that. Since Trump's inauguration, it's jumped back up again. But for basically 12 of those years, 11 to 12, 11 years, the share of voters who saw Republicans as too conservative was actually decreasing. And yet voters were seeing Democrats as becoming way more liberal. It's interesting. Next thing here is because of why did this happen? It's because Democrats have changed what they focus on. In this chart, Lane's going to show you here. You see today's Democratic Party compared to 2012 and how they're more focused on issues like climate change and democracy and abortion and identity and cultural concerns, and they're less focused on the economy and the middle class. You see the change of words in their platform from 12 to 2024, and you see big increases for racial terms and LGBT and hate and equity, but huge decreases for men and fathers and responsibility and tax cuts and veterans and economy and middle class and jobs. It's a big change in their platform. Voters think that Democrats are prioritizing the wrong issues. If you see this chart here, you see the share of voters who think Democrats are out of touch versus Republicans. Democrats in that 12-year period jumped from 51 to 70. Meanwhile, Republicans, it was actually down from 70 to 65 in terms of voters who think which party is out of touch. That's interesting to me. Next one here. They asked voters how much they thought Democrats currently prioritize each of the top issues and then compared it to what voters actually cared about. And you'll see in this chart, you can see on the far hand right there, the far right side there, positive numbers mean that voters thought Democrats prioritize that issue more than they should. Negative numbers think that they don't prioritize those issues enough. You see too much, undocumented immigrants, LGBT issues, raising taxes for social programs, DEI, abortion. Too little, securing the border, lowering everyday costs, crime, jobs, economic growth, cutting taxes on the middle class. When I started in politics, that's all you ever heard was cutting taxes on the middle class. Now Democrats don't even talk about it anymore. Almost done here, I promise. Next one here. Support for Democrats. You see a significant drop amongst working class and minority voters. When you see support for Democrats, it's up slightly with college-educated voters, especially whites, but it's down with everybody else, especially non-college educated voters. And you see there amongst Asians, Hispanics, African-American voters, Black voters, it's significantly down amongst those groups, especially non-educated voters, non-college educated voters. Next one here. Where have those declines in support been found? Well, mostly amongst moderate and conservative voters. You see here, they've actually held pretty good, even gone up a little bit with liberal voters, but they've gone down significantly amongst moderate voters. All right, last couple here to close us down. In part 4, they talk about the myth of mobilization, because there are Democrats, this is going to sound eerily familiar, Republicans, there are Democrats who argue that the party should move further left to mobilize their base. Sound familiar? This section examined if that mobilization theory actually works out. In this first chart, you see differences in electoral performance between different kinds of Democratic candidates. And you see there, those candidates that were endorsed by super progressive groups actually do up to 5% worse, while those candidates who were endorsed by more moderate groups did up to 6% better. They also actually tested Republicans too. Here's another chart for you. This is helpful. MAGA candidates did 7.5% worse on average. Meanwhile, those candidates that were endorsed by more moderate groups did up to 1.5% better. So you see here, again, this idea, we've talked about it 100 times in this podcast, that if you just go running and only focus on your base, you're not able to win elections. You've got to do both. You've got to persuade swing voters and turn out your base. You can't just run to the left if you're Democrats or just to the right if you're Republicans. Last thing here, because we've talked issues in this episode, let's close on that. They talked about in part 5 where Democrats should go from there. And they said, we need to focus on policies that are popular and focus less on policies which are not. And this is really interesting for Republicans. They looked at which issues were polling better or worse and how Democrats were doing on those issues. How much did voters trust them on those issues? In this chart, you saw that Democrats have trust deficits on most of the issues that are high priorities to the electorate. The economy, cost of living, inflation, even larger deficits on issues like border security and crime. By contrast, here's the last chart. Issues where Democrats were trusted really, really well, like climate change and abortion and LGBTQ issues, were all significantly less important to voters. So, a ton of data. We're trying to help you here as our audience to be more effective. Go read the whole report. I encourage you to do so. But any quick thoughts from our panel of political experts on everything you just heard?
You missed the most important part. You totally glossed over that the Democrat Party has become the party of the high propensity voter as we go into a midterm election, and that bodes bad for Republicans who often have a challenge of energizing their voters. I mean, even that Decide to Win highlighted that if every registered voter had voted, Trump would have won by more.
In 2024, yeah.
We often say this, right? There are enough Republican votes in Illinois to win the governor's seat, to win the U.S. Senate seat. And if you get them out, you win at the local and state level. And, right. That is.
But Craig, this is the problem,
challenge.
though, is the people who hear that are going to hear something different than what you meant. Because it's not about what you say, it's about what they hear. So let me just please try to clarify and tell me if I'm wrong. But the problem is there are people in our party who are going to hear what you said and say, see. Even Craig says it. If we just focus on getting our base out, we can win every election. But that is not what this study proved. And I just want to make sure we have a chance to clarify that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no discussion of whether that was base or not. There is a chart in there to go take a look at. The bigger point is not getting the base out, it's getting voters out. We tend to be a bit more apathetic in the off-cycle elections. It takes that presidential election to get people to the polls. Our challenge for 2026 will absolutely be the get out the vote, right? It's getting those voters to the polls and convincing them that it matters.
I think to your point, if we got all voters to the polls, that would do well for us. I think that's obviously the larger point you're making. I think we have to live in the reality that it's not a presidential election, which means a lot of those Trump voters are not going to show up to the polls. So you've got to try to get as many of those to the polls as you can. And for those who are going to the polls, we've got to do some persuasive efforts and give them some candidates they could actually vote for. It's a two-pronged approach. I just have to push back a little bit on that. If we don't do both, we're going to be screwed. Because with Trump not on the ballot, this idea that we could just turn out every Trump voter in the state and win every election is a complete fallacy. You're living in La La Land. Trump's not on the ballot. It's not going to happen.
Right. And I think the reality there is, what does the governor's race, since you were talking about the governor's candidates, what does the governor's race for the Republican primary look like till March? And then is it going to look different going to the general? It should be the same, right? You're targeting those independent voters in that primary messaging as well. I get it. They're not coming out and pulling that ballot, which is a challenge here in Illinois, the way we do things. But the messaging shouldn't change. And I still hold out hopes, right, that this primary makes every candidate better at the end, regardless of where they end up in the voting rank, and that the winner is stronger after the primary, not weaker.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with that.
You know, I'm gonna say the word Butler. What word
Synthesize.
There you go. I'm going to do that to two things right now. I'm going to bring up what Collin.
Chris's public school education and my non-public school education.
I had 9 years of Catholic school and the 4 years of public school, Collin.
I get it.
Anyway, I'm going to do that to two issues here. I'm going to talk about the Democrats' movement to the left and how it's screwing them over, and I'm going to talk about redistricting. That's going to be our that word for today. So, if the Democrats were smart, what they would do is they would find Democratic candidates who actually are moderates, who are actually in some cases conservatives, who are capable of overperforming with moderate voters, who are capable of having crossover support with the other side. And it would actually make this whole redistricting phenomenon we've talked about over the past few months so much easier for them. You could throw a solid Democratic state congressman into a R+5 district, and they would be capable of winning because they have the ideology and the messaging capable of winning that district. And I'm going to take that mentality and carry it over to the Republican side. Because what the fact of the matter is that Republicans have the deck stacked against them in this state. So if you're a Republican who is trying to win a statewide office in a state that is basically D+12, more or less 10, whatever you want to call it, or if you're a candidate for office who is running in a congressional seat, you need to understand that not only do you need that base, but you need to pull over Democrats with your message. You need to pull over independents because your Democratic opponent is going to talk out of both sides of their mouth. They're going to do things like say that oh so eloquently worded statement, I am fighting for working class families and affordability, while also saying that we need to have transgender surgeries on minors, we need to let girls in women's sports. So if you need to be the common sense person in a room, use that type of common sense messaging. If you're going to talk about affordability, hammer on affordability, but don't over rely on your base and don't over rely on the fact that you think that you need, and I've seen the Dabrowski campaign already do this, that don't think that you need to overextend yourself to your base and go further to the right, or else those people aren't going to vote for you. That is not backed up statistically. That is not backed up statistically. So it is important for all Republican candidates to remember that there is a large swath of this population who do not like what the Democrats are putting out there on some of these really extreme social issues. They don't like that. So, but don't play into their hand by going the exact opposite direction and focusing on issues that they on social issues that they also don't like on the Republicans. Thank you.
Anyone else have thoughts before we start to wind this thing down? It was just a lot of info, so it's all right. Let me take us to our news you can use. There's only 5 this week, but they're pretty good ones, and I have a feeling the senator and our and Carolyn as well might have some thoughts on some of these. So number 1 here, Pritzker's refusing transparency. If you remember, he wanted all of his departments to submit spending plans that showed that they could cut from their budgets. What was it, 4%? I think it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have it in my notes here. And they were supposed to do that by October 23rd is when that was supposed to be done. Republicans have asked for access to that information because, you know, it should be public information, how public tax dollars are being spent. Amy Elick said it right. I was very much looking forward to seeing where Governor Pritzker's agencies identified inefficiencies and excessive spending, and hoped that maybe this executive order would create a slightly more efficient government. Of course, we can't get access to it. Pritzker's hiding it, so should be no surprise. But supposedly there are efforts being done to find efficiencies in government, but good luck figuring out where your tax dollars are or are not going to be spent.
Well, I know like this House and Senate Republicans have been trying to get information. Reporters have been trying to get information, submitting FOIA requests, and the governor's office basically tells them to screw off and pound sand. So we'll see if anything actually comes to fruition, but I doubt it.
We've talked multiple times on this podcast. As a matter of fact, just go back and look at our news you can use from the last 3 months, because of all of Pritzker's embattled agencies, I think the Department of Corrections right now takes the cake. He's had a lot of problems with DCFS and others, but IDOC has been in the news repeatedly for problem after problem after problem. And we mentioned one of those appointments that Senate Democrats forced through the second to last day of veto session. The other one was LaToya Hughes, Governor Pritzker's acting director of IDOC, who is now the official director of IDOC. Despite all of these controversies and failures, the Center Square does a pretty good job calling out a number of those with quotes from Terry Bryant, Chapin Rose, Steve McClure, and a number of others. Plummer have talked about it. And I know you've talked about it, Senator. A lot of us have talked about the problems at the Department of Corrections and the problem with the Pritzker's agencies, and yet no accountability. The acting director, who has clearly failed at the job, has now been given the full-time position, the full official position, because that's how it works in Illinois. You fail upward if you're in Pritzker's administration. All right, moving to the next one. So there was a study done. CNBC had another really good study that was balanced and fair, and I really like some of the stuff they've been putting out lately. And they looked at states with high data center usage, high data center populations or whatever, quantities, if you will. They looked at the concentration in various states, and they saw that 3 of those states, it basically highlighted 5 total states. And I'll have Lane bring up one of the images from this study from CNBC, where they point to where energy rates have gone up and where they maybe haven't gone up as much. And if you look at states like Virginia, Illinois, and Ohio, energy rates have gone up 13% in Virginia, 16% in Illinois, 12% in Ohio, which matches the data center population being higher in those states. And they talk about how data centers are a huge driver of these increased costs. They also have quotes from Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut and Bernie Sanders from Vermont blaming the White House and their sweetheart deals with big tech companies. And as I talked about last week, I think there's an angle here for Republicans, considering it's a Democrat who has those sweetheart deals with big tech companies and how it's driving up energy rates. But if you also look in their study, you see two states, California and Texas, that also have a high population of data centers, but have common sense energy sectors that do an all of the above approach instead of only focusing on green energy. And you see how their energy rates didn't go up anywhere near as much. Texas went up 4%. California only went up 1%. We've talked about it over and over. This is common sense. If you don't increase supply, cost is going to continue to go up for working families because these costs get passed down to you on your bills. And that's what's happening in Illinois with the 16% increase year over year. And it's going to go up again next year if nothing is done. And by the way, nothing was done about it. So it's going to go up for working families next year too.
I just want to jump in because Craig hasn't yet, but that was no secret. I mean, that was talked about over and over when they were passing that bill. So on the floor, I mean, I don't know if you said anything about it, Craig, but I heard many senators and reps say that exact message as to why not to support it.
No. I mean, listen, I'm all for data centers. I would like to dominate that space because we have very few places in tech that we dominate over China anymore. So I get it. I'm all for it. But you got to pair that with a smart energy sector and policies in the energy sector, which we haven't done. And now it's working families and small businesses and manufacturers who are paying the price.
So it gets worse than that. If a company projects 2 or 3 data centers at different locations in the state and presents those proposals to the utilities have to be able to meet that demand. Even the company, if they only intend to build one of them, you're going to get the utilities working to get 3 times that energy. It's artificially driving up the price at the auctions. And I think it's rife with the potential for people to be manipulating this market. Imagine if a generating company is found out to be behind the projects for potential data centers because it drives up those prices, maybe increasing profits. What if it's others who are just playing a game saying they're going to bury Illinois with proposals to drive their energy costs up, knowing they're never going to build them? The requirements need to change there in a major way.
The populist message from a Republican. I like it, Craig. I like it. All right, next one here. Last one's here will be quick. Georgia Pacific, a major manufacturing company in this country, is closing their facility in Mount Olive, costing 134 jobs. We have a story like this every other day, it seems, let alone every week. But don't worry, Governor Gaslight, Pritzker will tell you everything's fine. Everything's fine. And dovetailing off that, here's our last one. Lane will bring up the graph here. Illinois' GDP growth since 2000 is behind our neighboring states. We're actually not last in this. Yay for Illinois. We're 33rd out of 51 because they also include DC in their rankings. But here's what drives me crazy. Wisconsin's 32, so just one spot above us. Minnesota's 31. Indiana's 2 spots above that. Iowa's up at 13th. Like, here's my thing. Illinois should not be behind those states. I know I'm super competitive, especially with Indiana and Wisconsin. I get that. But, like, with all of the benefits Illinois has, the percentage of freight trains that go through Chicago because we are the rail capital of the country, the ports we have, the airports we have, the workforce, the central location, Illinois should not be in 33rd in GDP growth over a 24, 25-year span. And we certainly should not be behind friggin' Wisconsin and Indiana and Minnesota and Iowa. Like, could we please have higher expectations for our state? I'm sick and tired of us cheering because we're 33rd. Like, we should be the jewel of the Midwest. And I'm sick and tired of the policymakers in this state and everybody else who enables them who are okay with less than average on a state that should be great. All right, with that, Clown and OG of the Week, what do you guys got? Give us your nominations. Let's have some fun.
Well, I got to give a clown nomination to the 2 Illinois Secretary of State employees that are being charged with bribery. They were accepting cash bribes to expedite the issue of driver's licenses and other, government documents, which is crazy.
$25 and $50. Like,
yeah, 25 and $50. Yeah. That's all they got.
Yeah, seriously. We keep seeing that all the time. Like, how many Democrats have been indicted for like they took a couple $1,000s as a bribe? Sheesh.
Yeah.
What else you guys got?
I'm going to go out on a limb. Pope Leo, clown of the week. How do you
Ooh.
meet with Governor Pritzker? Great. Maybe it truly was about immigration issues and how we treat our fellow humans. But when you look at Governor Pritzker's full ideology, I cannot believe the Pope would take that meeting. Very disappointed.
Well, hopefully he had some choice words on some of those other issues. I mean, I understand that they may be in agreement to some degree on immigration, but abortion and some of these other things, something needs to be said.
On
They
the
that
heels, just weeks of a 3 a.m. no notice end of life bill
Yeah.
being passed. Maybe the Pope talked him out of signing that. We'll see.
they that behold need not a physician, but they that are sick.
What else you guys got?
All timing together. You didn't bring up the Epstein files at all. This one, and I'm gonna touch on it. And the reason I will, because I'm gonna tie my OG and my clown of the week together on that one. My OG, I'm gonna put the people that voted to release the files, and for a bigger reason that the last couple of votes they've taken, I like that they're working together and trying to find consensus and crossing aisles, and maybe not the topics that we want to see, but it is definitely the process I want to see about them all voting together on the same bills, and it's being split decisions, but bipartisan in nature. So they're my OG in Congress there, and the people that voted for it. And then I have to give the clowns to those that are going to be exposed in the Epstein files. I mean, if you're a public official and you're doing things that just you're worried about being exposed, then you deserve to be the clown of the week.
Don't do those things. Yeah. I mean, I've been interested to see that there's not been a lot of reporting on the fact that Tom Pritzker's cousin, was in that. And I get it. Listen, I don't like attacking family, but when you have JB Pritzker, one of the most political people and partisan people out there, let me just run this by you, because I wasn't going to bring this up, because I don't think family should be part of this. I don't think family should be attacked in politics. But tell me this. If it was a Trump family member or a Ronner family member or a Craig Wilcox family member who was listed, you don't think Pritzker, the Democrats, would have put out 100 press releases about that? Like, so if if they can do it to us, then we should be doing it to them. One of Pritzker's cousins was listed repeatedly in those files. We should be talking about it.
Well, not just that. Also, when Pritzker was running for governor in 2018, somebody associated with his campaign was soliciting donations from Epstein and inviting him to, hey, come to this event, meet Pritzker. He's going to be the next governor. And it's like, I mean, we knew what he was doing in 2018. It wasn't shocked, and it wasn't like, oh, we didn't know about it. So just bad situation. And it's like, does Pritzker really even need to ask for money? Like, he would have just said, oh, don't bother asking him. I've got enough. But they're like, hey, Epstein, can we get a check?
If the Epstein files prove to turn a lot of Carolyn's people into those clowns and they turn out to be Republicans, we're going to own it, right? We are going to tell them, holy cow, how did we ever let this happen?
Yep.
If that were the case, these would have been released 8 years ago under different administrations. I think if this plays out the way I'm thinking it will, which will be highlighting a significant portion of major Democrat operatives, then the OG becomes Trump, who figured out how to get the Dems to demand the release of this after hiding it for 8 years, and what that impact's going to be. It's going to take some time. Maybe we'll finally know. But if this was a good old switcheroo, come get me, because I might be in there, demand the release so that I can actually do it and not look like it was a political hit and the reality is where it's going to fall. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, we'll see.
In relation to this, my clown of the week is Donald Trump for releasing a 392 word, 2,455 character speech on Truth Social, just going on and on and on about how the Epstein scandal is the new Russia hoax, and impeachment part 3. It was like the most nonsensical rambling I've ever read in my life. Who let this man have an unlimited character count? I know he did. That's why he created Truth Social. So listen, all because Elon Musk had to destroy Twitter that rat bastard. We all know it. Don't lie. Don't act like he ain't. So yeah, Donald Trump, for no other reason than you don't know how to post on social media anymore ever since you got rid of your own character account. Thank you.
Chris, is Melissa Conyers Irvin on there for?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry, thank you, Colin. See, Colin always reminds me of my number two clown the week after I go through number one. Yes, Melissa Conyers Irvin, the Chicago City Treasurer, who, in a genius move, decided to say that she was going to divest from the entire federal government because you can just do that, right? It's absolutely.
I love what Bill Conway pointed out that in an $11 billion portfolio, she only returned $400 million. That's a 3.6% return. Like U.S. Treasuries were doing better than that. If she put everything in U.S. Treasuries, she would have done a better job than what she did for the taxpayers. But sure, she's doing her job here as treasurer.
And it's a pure political stunt because she's done terrible as treasurer. And now that she's going to expect to be elected to Congress after she got smoked in 2024 against Danny Davis, she expects now to be elected to Congress. Like, this is a political stunt so she can get maybe some donors because Lord knows she can't really raise money. Maybe it's just to get points in the media from this extremely anti-Trump crowd that she's divesting from the federal government. But not even Democrats are saying this. It's ridiculous.
No. Let me give a couple quick ones here because we're running out of time and I actually have to get on the road here. So I have to say it. I don't know why we've got McHenry County people on here, so forgive me. I don't want to put you guys in a bad spot, but the Crystal Lake City clerk, former Crystal Lake City clerk, Nick Ketcherubis has pleaded guilty to child porn grooming charges. He started off as a Republican. He's more of a Democrat towards the end of his career, but we call this stuff out regardless of whether it was our party or not. Definitely clown of the week material there. The guy who robbed Don Harmon's staffer at knife point stole the staffer's phone, and then all they had to do was track the phone, and they picked up the criminal because the criminal wasn't smart enough to know that they could just track the phone. So, clown of the week there for that.
Well, and Colin, on that one, I mean, he did that knife point in the district office, not out on the sidewalk, not in a back parking lot. Went into the district office, apparently claimed to talk about a bill, and then pulled the knife.
Yeah. This one's tongue-in-cheek. Congratulations to Ben McAdams, the challenger to Seth Lewis in Senate District, I think 24, but 24, who has been endorsed by the West Suburban Illinois Democratic Socialists of America. Congratulations, Ben McAdams. I think that's an endorsement that everyone should know about, that you've been endorsed by the socialists in your race. So congratulations to you, Ben McAdams. Last
Be
one here.
Careful, Colin. This is DuPage County you're talking about. That might play there these days.
No. My last one is just a fun one. Lane, I'm going to ask you to pull this one up. I didn't send it to you, sorry. But Visual Capitalists they mapped out all the countries that eat the most meat. And United States of America right there in the top 5. And we're behind a bunch of tiny countries. So we're number 1, basically, of the bigger countries, eating 123 kilograms of meat. I just love it. I'm a meat lover. My family's meat lovers. So go America. Still eating meat. I like it. All right, let's go to our closing thoughts. We'll do this quickly. Let's let our guests go last. So, Chris and Michael, I ask you to keep this short and succinct. But, Michael, give me something better this week. Come on, buddy.
Hey, you won't see us next week because it's Thanksgiving. So I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy some downtime with family and friends, and then we'll get right back to it. So we'll see you in December.
Chris?
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Shout out to the Oak Forest High School football team. They're playing Providence this week, and I have a bet with State Representative Pat Sheehan on that game right now. Nice gentlemanly wager. So let's go Bengals, and everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Carolyn, I love having you on. Thanks so much for being here. Your final thoughts.
It is always great to be here. Thanks. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everybody next week as well. But I just wanted to reiterate one thing that Chris said, actually, because I may use it again in a campaign if it ever happens. But saying that one day we hope that crime has consequences and mental health has treatment. So thank you for that line. It is super powerful.
Chris, people being nice to you. I don't like it. All right, Senator, thank you for making the time for us. Your final thoughts. You get to close on the episode.
Absolutely. I'm going to close it with Chris's quote, Carolyn bringing it up in the reality that as the holiday seasons come upon us, it can be stressful, whether it's traveling or hosting family or finances or making sure that that your family's taken care of. And we did a veteran expo that was all talking about how don't be afraid to seek out some help. If things get anxious, get trying at a minimum, find someone just to talk to. But please take care of your mental health, your family's mental health, and your families in general as we go through the holidays.
I love that. That's a perfect place to end. As several mentioned, we won't be recording next week. We're taking a week off. We hope you take a week off from politics too. Have some fun with family. We'll be back in your inbox in 2 weeks. Thanks for being with us in the smoke-filled room.